Hey, you know what time it is? Woo! Get into it! Get into it! Yes! I'm back, baby. I'm back, darling. Oh my goodness. I keep over anticipating. I need to set the mic up. Hold on 1 second, y'all. I got you covered. Hold on. I got it in the wrong. There we go. Hold it. We pause momentarily for some technical difficulties. Please see the exits to your left. No, I'm just kidding. Hi, y'all. I'm back with Storytime with Chris. Sorry it took me a while to come back. I had a lot of trips to make and some stuff in my life that took a bit more precedence, but that does not mean that I don't have any love for this. This is my passion project. Next March, it'll be 4 years of Storytime with Chris. And I've always been very grateful to have this platform, to have this experience, to be able to share with you my love of literature. And as I always say, you don't have to watch these videos when they go live. You're more than welcome to watch them in your downtime, nap time, max relaxing, chillaxing time, in between time, mean time, scheme time, CP time, break time, study time, any time that you want to hear a highly animated voice bring you wonderful stories of magic, fantasy, science fiction, and adventure, and many, many more in between. So, I did something a little silly this morning. So I was under the impression that I was supposed to be working this morning because Mondays are in my availability, and I looked at the schedule and it looked like 8 to 3. I was like, I'm managing today. I get to work with my best friend Phil. It's a good time. Children, this is why it's definitely important to read stuff carefully. 2 or 3 times if you have to, just to make sure. Because here's what happened. I got up this morning, got dressed, had a great outfit for work, and was ready to get started. And I double checked to go clock in on my app once I got into the building. And come to find out, I'm not I'm not working today. I'm off today. And I was just like, well, I didn't realize that. I could have still been asleep. Which I did come home, have a little bit of breakfast, and then took a wee little nap. And then I was reading before I started this. And then after this, I'm going to the gym. So, all in all, it's okay to make mistakes. That kind of mistake is good. I mean, I've definitely made the mistake of oversleeping and being an hour late to work, and that's been embarrassing. So, even if you think you've done it, always double or triple check. As silly and paranoid that may seem, I would rather be overly prepared than underprepared. So, without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started. We're back with Lloyd Alexander's Taran Wanderer. And the last time we were here, King Smoit, who is the leader of the major cantrives of the, if I'm not mistaken, the northern parts of Prydain, his two, I'll call them, they're called cantrive lords, so they work under him. Gorion and, oh my gracious, Gast and Gorion. Okay, so they're both G's. I can remember that. But they both got into a bit of a disagreement, and one of them has stolen the cows from his farm. And now King Smoy is just like, hey, I'm going to get them together and I'm going to put them in the dungeon and they will receive punishment. And Taran's like, well, maybe we shouldn't have an all-out war and attack. And so now we're going to figure out what happens next. And so, like I said, the story is a bit different from the 3 books we've read prior to this one. This is going to be a bit darker in scope, so I just want to caution for kids that are watching with parents, there's going to be a bit more action involved with this story. But if you're okay with that, it is a fantasy story, so without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. Whew. And no, I don't own the music in the background that you are listening to right now, which is brought to you by Fantasia ambiance. Please check them out on YouTube. Like, share, and subscribe. And if you haven't already done so, like and share and subscribe to my YouTube channel. I don't do this for profit. I do it to get kids as well as adults excited about the magic of reading and the power of literature. Because as I was always taught by my mom and dad, is that reading is not just fundamental, it's essential. My parents pushed me to be a bookworm because they knew that it would help me soar in life and learn about different people and learn about different cultures and learn about different perspectives other than my own. And I'm very grateful for both of them for really pushing for that. So let's get started. Chapter 5, A Judgment. Taran scrambled down the rocks jutting beside the high cascade. In a pool hammered into white spray, he could hardly make out Smoit's burly form spinning in the eddies. Heedless of the pounding water, Taran pitched through the falls and sprang into the pool. He groped for Smoit's belt and seized it at last. Battling the whirlpool and nearly drowning himself with his own efforts, Taran painfully strove to drag the half-conscious king into the shallows. Smoit was bleeding heavily from the forehead, and his ruddy face had gone chalky pale. Taran tugged at the king's waterlogged bulk, hauling himself to safety from the rolling waters. In another moment, Gurgi and Fluter were beside him, helping to drag the king ashore. Smoit, like a beached whale, collapsed on the bank. Gurgi, moaning anxiously, loosened the king's garments, while Taran and the bard hastily saw to Smoit's injuries. "He can count himself lucky he's only cracked his skull and half his ribs," Fluter said. "Another man would have been snapped in two, but we're in a fine pickle," he added under his breath to Taran, glancing at the warriors who had come to gather near the unconscious Smoit. "He'll not lay Gast or Gorion by the hills now. He needs more healing than we could give. We'd best take him to Caer-Codard." Taran shook his head. He remembered Smoit's words about the neighboring Cantreave lords who would seize the opportunity to attack. It was in his mind, too, that finding Cornillo could best bring Gast and Gorion to terms and thus end their battle, which, by the way, Cornillo is this famous cow that is technically King Smoit's property, but it's supposed to have the best milk in the land and is able to bring about other great cows that bring about tilling of the land and whatnot. Because, fun fact, before we had tractors and whatnot, people would lash up cows, horses, Clydesdales more specifically. Clydesdales are these huge hoofed horses that are able to pull carts, wagons, barrels of drink and stacks of hay. It's very heavy labor. So what they would do is they would latch these very heavy set cows to pull these heavier pieces of machinery or farm equipment or harvesting material and so on and so forth. So it's a pretty big deal for the king. But his thoughts were as tangled as Ordou's weaving, and he fervently wished himself in the place of Smoit, whose unconsciousness at that moment seemed a most inevitable fate. "Adad's armhold is closer," Taran said. "We'll bring him there, and Gurgi shall stay with him. You and I must seek out Gast and Gorion and do what we can to stop their quarrel. As for Cornillo and the herd, I doubt we may hope to find them." The companions, tearing their cloaks into strips, set about binding up Smoit's wounds. The king's eyelids fluttered, and he groaned loudly. "Give me to eat," gasped Smoit. "I may be half drowned, but I'll not be half starved." He put a hand on Taran's shoulder. Good lad, you saved my life. Another moment and I'd have been beating into a pudding. Claim any favor, it is yours." "I ask none," Taran replied, knotting the bandages around Smoit's huge chest. "Alas," he muttered, "what I most want, none can grant." "No matter," panted Smoit. "What you wish of me, you shall have." "Sir, you cannot travel far," Taran began as Smoit tried painfully to climb to his feet. "Give us leave to ride with your warriors and—" "Kind master, here!" Gurgi called excitedly. "Here with listenings!" Lion, too, had caught some sound, for her ears cupped forward and her whiskers twitched. "It's my gizzard calling for meat and drink," called Smoit. "Loud it must be, for I'm empty as a drum." "No, no," shouted Gurgi, seizing Taran's arm and drawing him past the trees along the riverside. "Gurgi hears no thrummings and drummings, but cooings and mooings." Leaning on the bard, Smoit stumbled after them. Gurgi had spoken the truth. The creature's sharp ears had not deceived him. Now Taran himself heard a faint lowing. Gurgi raced toward the sound. Beyond the trees, the land dipped into a shady dell watered by a streamlet. Taran cried aloud. There stood the herd, grazing calmly around Cornillo. "My pulse!" bellowed Smoit so loudly that a dozen horned heads turned and stared as alarmed as if some strange new kind of bull had burst into their quiet pasture. "Great Beelard!" cried Fluter. "Cornillo's led them all to safety. She's wiser than any of her masters." Cornillo raised her head as Taran hurried to her side. She blew out her breath gently and rolled her eyes in a look of long-suffering patience. Like this. There we go. Smoit, heedless of his grievous bruises, clapped his hands triumphantly and shouted at the top of his voice for his warriors. "Sire, let us drive the herd to Adan's farm," Taran urged. "Your own hurts must be tended better than we've done."
"Drive them where you please, lad," answered Smoit. "My body and bones, we have them now. That will fetch Gast and Gorion to me at a gallop."
He summoned 2 horsemen, commanding them to bear a message to the Cantreave lords.
"Tell those 2 troublemakers where I'll await them," cried Smoit, "and tell each to call truce, for his cows are found."
"And Gurgi found them," shouted Gurgi, capering wildly. "Yes, yes! Bold, clever, sharp-eared Gurgi finds all that is lost. Oh, yes." He flung his hairy arms around himself and seemed close to bursting with pride and delight at his own deed. "Oh, bards will sing of clever Gurgi with rantings and chantings." "I'm sure they will, old friend," Taran said. "You found the herd, but don't forget, we still have Gast and Gorion to deal with, and there's only one Cornillo." The cows were at first reluctant to quit the dell, but after much coaxing, Taran was able to lead Cornillo along the valley pathways toward Adan's farm. The others followed her, lowing and tossing their horns. It was a strange procession that wended its way across the meadows and rolling hillocks. Smoit's warriors rode on either side of the herd, and the red-bearded king himself brandished a spear as if it were a drover's staff. Lion padded after the cattle, alert for strays, and Gurgi perched proudly as a shaggy rooster on Cornillo's back. When Adan's hut came in sight, Taran galloped ahead, calling to the farmer, but he had no sooner dismounted when the door burst open and he fell back surprised. Adan stood with a rusted sword in his hand. Behind the farmer, Taran glimpsed Alarka, sweeping into her apron. "Is this how you repay kindness?" Adan cried, recognizing Taran immediately. His eyes blazed as he pointed the ancient weapon at the approaching warband. "Do you come with them to spoil our land? Begone! It is already done." "How then?" Taran stammered, shocked at these words from one he held to be a friend. "I ride with King Smoit and his men. We seek peace between Gast and Gorion." "Does it matter whose warriors trampled my crops?" Adan flung back. "What Gast has destroyed, Gorion has double destroyed, warring back and forth across my field, till not a blade of wheat stands. Battle is their pride, but my farm is my life. Do they seek vengeance? I sought only a harvest." In the weariness of despair, Adan bowed his head and cast his sword to the ground. Taran stared in dismay at the field where Adan had so painfully labored. The hooves of steeds had churned the earth to mud, uprooting the young shoots, which now lay torn to shreds. The harvest on which Adan had staked his livelihood would never come. And Taran felt the farmer's heartbreak as if it were his own. And that does hurt when you, as an aside, y'all, it hurts when you work hard on something for a long period of time and somebody either breaks it or it gets lost, or people aren't paying attention and take it unceremoniously or throw it away. That does hurt. But that doesn't mean that you can't do it anymore. Just got to keep going. You fall down 7 times, get up 8, because it's the getting back up that counts. Before he could speak, a troop of horsemen galloped from the woods edging the farm. Taran recognized Lord Gorion at their head. In another moment, Lord Gast and his riders appeared. Catching sight of his arrival, the Cantreave lord spurred his mount and galloped frantically to the cottage, flung himself out of the saddle, and with a furious shout, raced toward Gorion.
"Robber!"
cried Gast. "Do you mean to steal Cornillo from me again?"
"Thief!" cried Gorion. "I took what was mine to begin with."
"Liar!" roared Gast. "Never was she yours."
Insults! Insolence!
roared Gorion, his face turning purple, his hand snatching for his sword.
Be silent!
Bellowed Smoit. He shook his battle axe at the Cantreeve lords.
Your king speaks. How dare you quarrel and insult each other, you pig-headed brawlers?
Smoit gestured to his warriors, who strove to seize Gorion and Gast. The riders of the two warbands cried out angrily and made to unsheath their swords. For an instant, Taran feared another battle would rage then and there. But Smoit's warriors stood their ground, and the sight of the enraged king himself caused the horsemen to draw back submissively.
My dungeon will teach you to be good neighbors, cried Smoit. You'll stay there till you learn. As for Cornello, I've split my skull, cracked my bones, and ridden to the edge of starvation this day, and so I claim her for myself, a prize of war, and shall small recompense it is for the vexation you've given me. Another day, and you'd have set the whole Cantreeve ablaze.
At this, Gast and Gorion both roared in furious protest, and Taran could no longer hold his tongue. He strode to the king's side. Sire, even a lifetime in your dungeon will not raise one grain of wheat on a ruined field. Aedan has lost all he had hoped to gain. One harvest to keep himself and his wife alive. You offered me a favor, Taran went on. I refused it then. Will you let me claim it now?
Ask what you please, my lad, replied Smoit. It is already given.
Taran hesitated a moment as he stepped forward and stood facing the Cantreeve lords. Then he turned to Smoit. I ask you this, he said. Set Gast and Gorion free. While Smoit blinked in astonishment, Gorion, glimpsing Taran for the first time, exclaimed, It's the pig keeper who cozened me out of my horse. I took him for a lout, but he speaks a noble favor. Granted, Smoit, he speaks true wisdom. Set them free, Taran continued, to labor beside Aedan and strive to mend what they have destroyed. What? Cried Gast. I took him for a hero, but he's no more than a lout. How dare he ask Gast the generous to delve the ground like a mole and for no reward? Impudence! Impertinence! Insolence! Shouted Gorion. I'll not have a pig keeper pass judgment on Gorion the valorous. Nor on Gast the generous, exclaimed Gast. Pass judgment on yourselves, then, Taran answered, picking up 2 handfuls of earth and torn shoots and holding them before the furious Cantreeve lords. This is what remains of Aedan's livelihood. As well take a sword and slay him. Look on this, Lord Gorion. For there is more truth here than in your tales of giants and monsters. And this he treasured, Lord Gast, more than you treasure any of your possessions. And it was more truly his own, for he toiled to make it so. Gast and Gorion had fallen silent. The 2 rough Cantreeve lords stared at the ground like sheepish boys. Aedan and his wife looked on without speaking.
The lad has a better head on his shoulders than I do, exclaimed Smoit, and his judgment is wiser, kinder too, for my choice would have been the dungeon, not the delving.
The Cantreeve lords reluctantly nodded agreement. Taran turned to Smoit. The rest of my favor is this. Grant most where need is greatest. Do you claim Cornello for your own? Sire, give her to Aedan.
Give up Cornello? Smoit began, sputtering and choking. My prize of war!
He finally nodded his head.
So be it, lad.
Aedan shall keep her, Taran went on, and Gast and Gorion shall have her next calves.
What of my herd?
Cried Gorion. And mine, cried Gast. They're so mixed together no man can tell his own from another's. Lord Gorion should divide the heads in equal portions, Taran said. He shall not, Lord Gast broke in. He'll give me all the scrawny ones and keep the fat for himself. It's I who'll divide them. Not so, shouted Gorion. You'll fob off none of your raw-boned creatures on me. Lord Gorion shall divide the herds, Taran repeated, but Lord Gast shall be first to choose his half.
Well said! Smoit burst out roaring with laughter. My breath and blood! You have them there. Gorion divides and Gast chooses. Ho, 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 ho. It takes 2 thieves to strike an honest bargain.
Aedan and Alarka had come to stand before Taran and King Smoit. Who you may truly be, I do not know, the farmer said to Taran, but you befriended me far better than I befriended you. Oh, wisdom of kindly master, cried Gurgi, as the Cantreeve lords set about dividing their herds and Smoit's warriors made ready to return to Caer Codorn. Gurgi finds cows, but only a wise master knows what to do with them. If indeed I did rightly, Taran replied. Gast and Goya will be waiting for Cornello's calves. Gast said they were always twins. I only hope, he added with a grin, that she doesn't disappoint us. Oh. Excuse me. Sorry, y'all. I'm alright. Somebody must be talking about me. That's what typically it means when you yawn. Or if you're tired, which I slept earlier, so I'm fine. It was long after nightfall when the companions at last reached Caer Cadaern. Fflewddur and Gurgi were too exhausted to do more than fling themselves onto their couches. Taran would gladly have followed them, but Smoit took his arm and drew him to the great hall.
"Count your day well spent, my lad," cried Smoit. "You've spared the country from a war, and me from being drubbed into jelly. As for Gast and Gorion, how long they'll stay at peace with each other, I'll not guess. But you've taught me one thing. My dungeons are useless. My body and bones, I'll have them walled up directly. From this day, I'll try my hand at speaking instead of smiting. And yet, lad," Smoit went on, furrowing his brow, "my wits are slow. I need no man to tell me that, and I'm easier in my mind when I have a blade in my hand. Will you return favor for favor? Stay with me in Cantreve Cataphor."
Sire, Taran answered, I seek to learn who my kinsmen are. I cannot...
"Kinsmen!" shouted Smoit, slapping his great girth. "That's enough for me to make all the kinsmen you could want. Hear me well," he added, his voice quieter now. "A widower am I and childless. Do you yearn for parents? No less do I yearn for a son. When the horn of Gwyn the hunter sounds for me, there shall be none to take my place, and none would I choose but you. Stay, lad, and you shall one day be king of Cataphor."
King of Cataphor? Taran cried. His heart leaped. What need to seek the mirror when he could offer Eilonwy a royal throne, the proudest gift he could ever lay at her feet? Taran, king of Cataphor! The words rang more sweetly in his ears than Taran, assistant pigkeeper. Yet suddenly his joy turned cold. While Eilonwy might honor his right, could she respect him for abandoning his quest even before it had begun? Could he respect himself? For a long while Taran did not answer. Then with fond admiration he turned his eyes to Smoit. "The honor you would give me," Taran began, "there is nothing I would value more highly. Yes, I long to accept it." His voice faltered. "Yet I would rather hold kinsmen by right of noble birth, not as a gift. It may be," he went on slowly, "that in truth I am nobly born. If it should prove thus, then gladly would I rule Cataphor."
"Now then," cried Smoit, "my body and bones! I'd rather see a wise pigkeeper on my throne than a blood prince who's a fool."
"But there it is as well," Taran answered. "It is in my heart to learn the truth about myself. I will not stop short of it. Were I to do so, who I truly am would forever be unknown, and through all my life I would feel a part of me lacking." At these words, King Smoit's battle-scarred face fell with sadness, and regretfully bowed his head. But after a moment he clapped Taran heartily on the back.
"My breath, beard, and blood!" he cried. "You have a will to chase the wild goose, will-o'-the-wisp, looking-glass, or whatever it may be, and I say no more to keep you from it. Seek it out, lad. Whether or not you find it, come back to Cataphor, and I will welcome you. But hasten, for if Gast and Gorion are ever at loggerheads again, I'll not vouch for how much of the Cantreve will be left."
Thus Taran, with Gurgi and Fflewddur Flam, set off once more. In his secret heart, Taran cherished the hope he might return to Smoit's realm, with proud tidings of his parentage. Yet he did not foresee how long it would be until he set foot in Cantreve Cataphor again. And that is where we will end for today. You know, I love reading books with, like, actual illustrations on the front of a part of the book that you will come to in the story. To me, a cover is important, but the cover is not the book. The cover may look nice, but until you read between the lines, you may find out that the king may actually be a crook. So, even though covers are important to garner people's attention, it's always good to at least read the inside of the cover or the back of the cover to see what the story is actually about. And I always love getting books like these with really great illustrations by artists, because eventually we're going to come up to that scene in the book and then I can turn and be like, oh, this is the scene that the cover has. It's like a title drop, like the movie Independence Day. When they say the title in the movie, they're like, today will be our Independence Day. And they're like, yeah, they dropped the title. It's great. It's kind of like what they did with the Disney live action remake of The Little Mermaid. They dropped the title. It's like, well, I'm not going to spoil it there because some people have not seen the movie, so I'll keep my mouth shut. But title drops are cool, just like cover drops are cool when it happens in a story. So, without further ado, have a wonderful day, y'all. I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.